Hi, I'm Barbara Lucas, and welcome to the Green Room, where we explore the environmental issues that green up our world. Today we'll be talking about motor vehicle speeds, how they affect the quality of life in a community, and what factors influence them. Our guest is Norm Cox, licensed landscape architect and president of the Greenway Collaborative. Norm, welcome to the show.
Great, thanks. Glad to be here.
So we are interested in lowering speeds. Why don't we just lower the speed limit on the posted sign?
Well, for first, it wouldn't work. People drive a roadway or a street based on the context, what's happening. And if you just lowered the speed, there's just simply not enough police officers to slow everyone down. You would slow down traffic in one area where you would have the police for one day, they'd move, the speed would go faster there while they go to a different location. People drive a road based on what's happening around, the context. Is it downtown? Is it a residential area? And all kinds of different aspects of the roadway.
And simple physics tells us that the faster a car is going, the more damage they're going to do if they hit a pedestrian or a bicyclist. And it seems like it's a kind of a cultural thing, how much we accept, how many fatalities we accept. And I've been reading about something new recently called Vision Zero. Can you explain what that is?
Sure. Well, if you look in the United States, we average like 33,000 deaths every year. The
Wow.
fatality rate is just astounding. And most people don't think about it. I mean, would we accept that if that was the fatality rate every year of a war? No. But
Good point.
we have to, everyone said, this is just not right. And the Vision Zero really kind of came out of Europe. And I believe it was the Sweden that kind of initiated this. They have been working on traffic for a lot of, trying to improve traffic safety for quite a while. And they were just chipping away little by little. And they said, perhaps we're looking at this wrong. We've always looked at things as far as a cost benefit. Everyone used different things of like, what is a life worth? Some people say it's like 1.4 million as far as the cost of the community. Other people say it's more like really $4.6 million as far as what we'd pay to kind of preserve and have that person contribute to society. And we say, okay.
How can you put a cost on a life?
It's pretty crass, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it was a way we kind of said, okay, if we're going to spend money on an improvement, let's look at what that improvement how many lives it will potentially save based on some research and what things have done in the past. What is the cost of that facility? And then about what is the benefit that we have from saving these lives? So someone said, that's crazy. That really our goal should be zero fatalities. There is nothing that we gain from society, from mobility, that's worth the cost of a life or really damaging the quality of someone's life by a kind of a real debilitating injury that will haunt them for the rest of their life. So I said we have to go about things differently. And so that Vision Zero started in Europe. It's been picked up by a number of countries. And we're seeing it really in the United States. New York has the Vision Zero, same with San Francisco. So it's something that's kind of gaining ground.
And in an area where you do want pedestrians and bicyclists, what would be a safe speed for cars in that area?
Well, it depends. If you're on a residential road in the neighborhood, the Vision Zero idea is really, 20 miles per hour. Because if you're hit by a motor vehicle, 95% of the time, you're going to survive that. And recognizing in a residential area, you have people using the roadway, runners, walkers, bicyclists. It's a very different type of character street where people are mixing. I mean, think about how most people recreate. You're going running in your local neighborhood roads or taking your bike. When you get to a different type road that's kind of moving you through a community, the thought is 30 miles per hour.
Would you call that an arterial?
Well, there's different things we have kind of classified in the United States and perhaps that leads to some of our problems. We have arterials, which are the main roads that are supposed to move traffic from point A to point B, and that's their main purpose. And then we go down, we have collectors, which are a bit of moving people forward and backwards and also getting to destinations. But on roads like that, the Vision Zero would say, well, 30 miles per hour. And the reason is a couple-fold. A, about 30 miles per hour, when you're a pedestrian, you don't do very well when you're hit by a motor vehicle. Your chances of surviving just start dropping dramatically when you're at 40 miles per hour. It's you know, your chances of surviving are not very good at all. But also, it's not just pedestrians and bicyclists. If you're a motor vehicle, if we have all these stop and yield signs, one of the most deadly type of crashes for motor vehicles are what we call the T-bone or the side impact, exactly, where one car hits another car and you don't have the trunk and the motor vehicle or the engine area to kind of absorb that impact. It hits on the side, and if you have the lower vehicle speeds, it's much more likely to survive as a motorist, even if it's a car-on-car type crash. So that kind of lowers speeds, or that was the idea of lowering speeds. You're going to survive a crash when it does happen.
And I know in Michigan and many other parts of the world, they're talking about complete streets, saying that we need to have our streets designed for all users. So let's talk about what are some of the techniques that can be used to actually reduce the speeds of cars in these low speed areas. For instance, they used to think that the safest thing was to have the road be really wide so that the cars would be really far from the pedestrians and the bicyclists. But now they're saying it's the opposite, right?
Well, it depends how you want to kind of separate things. The lane width, let's look at that first. Everyone kind of said, well, lanes should be 12 feet for motor vehicles. That was kind of accepted. Someone did a study, and actually a lot of the roads they looked at were in Oakland County here in Michigan, and basically found there's really no difference whether the road is 10 feet wide, 11 feet wide, or 12 feet wide as far as crashes or safety.
Really?
It doesn't impact the flow of motor vehicles. So it was kind of a myth. It was something that we kind of operated with. And so that's kind of one thing where the width of the motor vehicle lanes doesn't impact things. But you were also asked about kind of for bicycles, do you need more space? Well, it depends. If you have cars, the speed differential between motor vehicles and bicycles is pretty minimum. They could actually mix and share the space. The greater that speed differential is, the more kind of space you need. You might give them a 5-6 foot wide bike lane. And a lot of people are actually pretty comfortable in a bike lane if the road is like 30 miles per hour. The road starts getting up to 45 miles per hour or out in a rural area, then you actually, the comfort level to get more people bicycling it, you want a bike lane that's separated with some type of painted buffer or ideally even some type of physical buffer.
Okay.
So the faster or the greater the speed differential, the more you need to kind of separate uses.
And in terms of the pedestrians or bicyclists crossing a street, I guess, you know, the designs of these really wide roadways has made it hard for people to get across safely. What are some techniques to sort of shorten the distance for people to get across?
Well, I think the main thing we need to look at when it comes to people crossing the road is people will cross the road. And we have created these
Not at
roads.
lights, you mean?
Not at lights. Well, it
Yeah.
depends.
Well, I've heard that not at lights is such a bad place for accidents.
Actually, that's not always the case.
Really?
One thing we found is most pedestrian trips, just like for driving, if you're doing your daily errands going down to the store, you're only spending 10, 15 minutes. So that's a pretty short walking distance. And we have designed so many roads where the distance between signals could be a half mile, even more sometimes. So if you're living on this side of the street in your apartment complex and the Kroger's is across the way, are you going to walk a quarter a mile down to that light and then come back? No, you're going to cross there. So I think one of the things with complete streets is we've come to recognize we have to look at the context. If there are people on one side and destinations on the other side, we have to recognize that people are going to cross, so we need to provide facilities for them to cross. Now, probably the best, most effective way we do this are crossing islands.
Okay.
You take it could be a fairly complex thing where you're looking for traffic in one direction and then looking at traffic in another direction, and you're trying to judge, can I get all the way across there? And you simplify it. You say, okay, I'm looking for a gap in traffic from one direction, and I go out to an island, and I could be in that island, and then I look in traffic in another direction, and then I could cross. So it makes it easier from a pedestrian standpoint. From a motorist standpoint, it's much more helpful, or it screams, I should say, pay attention.
Yeah.
More than any paint on the sidewalk, more than any signs, the idea that there's a physical obstruction in the roadway says to the motorist, be aware that there are pedestrians crossing here. And sometimes we have to use those where there are fewer crossings to kind of, because someone's not really expecting a pedestrian to cross there. So having more where fewer crossings are actually makes sense. Now you said, is it safe? Well, pedestrians and bicycle crashes are just like motor vehicle crashes. All the crashes, not all, a lot of them happen at the intersections because there's turning movements and everything happening. And so if you're a pedestrian crossing a road, someone may be looking for a gap in traffic, a motorist, and looking for that gap, they may not see the pedestrian crossing the road, even though the pedestrian has a walk. If the pedestrian's in the middle of the block, you take all those turning movements out of the picture. So it actually, in many times, could be safer. But there are some other things we need to kind of compensate for pedestrians that have vision impairments and things of that nature.
And then in terms of getting less distance between each side of the road for the pedestrian to cross, there's bulb outs or curb outs or something like that?
Yeah, when you have on-street parking, one of the things, well, on-street parking is good in many ways because it separates the sidewalk from moving cars, and it's a physical buffer. But the problem with it, when you're trying to cross in the middle of the road, they block the pedestrian. And the pedestrian can't quite see around, or the motorist can't see that, hey, someone is actually trying to get across the roadway. They don't make eye contact. So what the bulb out or kind of curb extension does is it takes place of that parking, and the pedestrian is out there on a little kind of extension of the sidewalk, so it's really clear to the motorist that there is someone there on the edge of the roadway trying to get across the road. And also then the pedestrian and the motorist can see each other. Also, if we don't put them there, even if we say no parking, that's where the FedEx and UPS trucks will park, or someone is going to park to drop someone off, and we will, put the worst type of vehicle blocking visibility when we really need better visibility.
One thing you said a little earlier about visibility was kind of interesting because apparently if you have more visual distractions, cars will slow down. You mentioned that, letting cars know that there are pedestrians out there, things to watch out for. So that seems to be a interesting concept, that instead of, clearing the area of all distractions, making it safer, maybe it's actually the opposite.
Yeah, if you look at how we designed our roadways for so long, we would say, we want to build in buffers and room for error. So on the side of a roadway, there would be a kind of recovery area. We would take the trees and pull them far back, and we'd say, well, for designing a road for a certain speed, we would even build in a little bit of engineering buffer. Like, well, we want this to be a 35-mile-an-hour road, but let's design it like it was a 45-mile-an-hour just in case. And what's happened?
People drive faster.
Well, it's, again, like I said, people respond to how the roadway feels. And if everything is pulled out, then you can say, well, there's nothing to worry about. But if the trees are close, there's parked cars, if you see islands in the middle of the roadway, a lot of pedestrian crossing, you kind of like, well, I need to pay attention.
I've even heard there's safety in numbers, that they've done studies where they've found that the more pedestrians and the more bicyclists on a roadway, the more carefully the cars will drive.
Yeah, and that's actually true both in a specific area and also system-wide, something that's really across the world.
Wow.
I attribute to a couple things. One, just expectations. Just think of someone who drives down State Street by Central Campus.
You go slow.
You're expecting a pedestrian
Really
to go
slow.
out between parked cars. You're on ultimate alert because I expect pedestrians here.
Or you avoid it altogether, which is part of the plan, really, right? Because if they're trying to get more pedestrians there, it's better if you know to avoid it.
Or just to bring everyone down to a compatible speed is really a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
So the safety numbers, if your expectations. And I think the other thing is it humanizes. If all of a sudden there's a lot of pedestrians and bicyclists, all of a sudden they're not the annoying thing that's slowing you down from getting from point A to point B. Because, I mean, realistically, when we're behind a wheel of a car, we don't want anything slowing us down. But if all of a sudden that impediment to you getting quickly to your destination could very well be your neighbor, a friend, a relative, and you empathize with them because you may be a pedestrian or bicyclist sometimes, that makes a difference on how people drive.
Interesting. And I've heard that having texture to the road slows people down. There's brick roads, like for instance in Ann Arbor there's some brick, and I do remember going more slowly on those roads. It's not like I couldn't go faster, but something about the vibration and the sound just slows you down.
Yes, I mean, naturally you go faster and you actually have a very audible feedback to your speed. You know, the pitch of the road changes very noticeably the faster you go. And also a lot of our brick streets are in very areas, you know, like farmers market and such, where again you expect a lot of pedestrians and such.
I was thinking of the street I grew up on. They finally paved it over after a lot of years, and it's so smooth now that I'm sure people go really fast. It's just a shame that they can't keep those roads, the brick ones. Well, maybe they could if they tried, or if they had enough money. But all these things, of course, cost money. I was looking at what is it called, a in-roadway yield sign in Royal Oak. I was there last weekend.
Oh yeah, they have a bunch of them downtown.
Yeah, they have a lot of crosswalks, and I was thinking, wow, those have got to be fairly inexpensive to just stick this little thing right up, and it really helps the driver to realize, wow, I really have to slow down.
Yes, Michigan State has used a lot of those. They were having all kinds of problems. Again, it's a kind of cheap, temporary thing you could do, but you're putting a little obstruction in the roadway. And it makes people like, oh, I need to pay attention.
I've heard even like planters or banners along the side of the road. Those aren't expensive.
Trees.
Yeah.
Trees are, I can't say enough about how important trees are to slowing down a street, and also its character. And I think that's
True,
one thing that we're
much more pleasant, livable.
Yeah.
I'm sure it increases economic vitality. Don't more retail action happen around that kind of thing?
Well, think about this. Thing I always like to say is a community is defined by its streets. If you come into a community, you know, you've never been there before, what do you see? Are you seeing the high-speed, 5-lane, strip mall-lined road that could be anywhere? And, you know, no trees, just utility lines, and the businesses are set way back? Or are you seeing kind of a leafy green street with businesses lining, and you're seeing people walking? That impression, that first impression, makes a difference. And also, you know, we talked about slowing people down for pedestrian safety, for motorist safety. Well, can you really tell what's going on with the business if you're driving by at 40 miles per hour or 45? No. The slower you go, you start seeing things. And you're like, oh, I never noticed that store there. And so from a merchant standpoint, you increase your visibility dramatically the slower the speed goes. And people think, well, that's just going to stop the flow of traffic. But really, you could actually move traffic more efficiently at lower speeds.
Instead of hurry up and wait, you're just having everybody go more smoothly.
Yeah, well, just take a look at Washtenaw, you know, our business loop going from I-94 over to US 23. It's about 6 miles. How much longer do you think it would take to drive that road at 30 miles per hour versus 35 if you were to go through? 2 minutes. It's the difference between like 10 minutes and 12 minutes. So really, it doesn't, all our delay, it's at the intersections and the stop signs and the signals. The speed doesn't really slow you down from getting point A to point B very much. And again, the slower the traffic, it's, you know, you're like you're saying, you're not stop, rush to the next signal. And that's where things like roundabouts work well, of keeping traffic moving at a slow, steady pace. So that's the goal, slow and consistent.
But if it's wide and straight, they'll just go fast and hurry up to the next step. So something like a chicane, do you explain what those are? And can you even just use like planters and things? Is there a way to do those without having it be horrendously expensive?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of ways. Well, again, with chicanes, probably this is something that's more on the residential end of things. A lot of times you'll have a local road that's more residential that parallels a busier road or is a way to kind of cut through. And so you have a lot of traffic that's going through the neighborhood at a high rate of speed. So what a chicane does is it visually changes the road from a straight shot. You're bumping out, and all of a sudden you no longer see the whole width of the road. Usually they're paired. You might have to wait for a car coming the other direction. Just like in some of our older streets, you know, with cars parked on both sides, sometimes you have to kind of stop, wait for that other car, and that slows down traffic to a more desired speed.
So another thing that I think is really interesting are driver feedback signs that help people to know that they're speeding or to, you know, give them some kind of almost like biofeedback. Can you tell us about those?
Well, yes, and if we don't have, because changing the context is something that's going to take time. But one thing they found very effective, and you start seeing them around town, is that thing that will be measuring your speed and saying, you are going 40 miles an hour and you're supposed to be going 30, and it'll flash. It gets your attention, and they've actually found that does drop the motor vehicle speeds. It's a way of kind of giving you a little dope slap of like, pay attention. You're going much faster than you think you are, and much faster than you're supposed to be through this area.
I find them really helpful anyway.
And they're quite economical. You could even, some of these units you could actually move from place to place, you know, from one pole and just move them around the community. And they also collect information on speeds too.
So that if the police need to target certain areas where there's really high speeders, then they would have that information. They would know where to focus. Or
it could say, okay, actually, this is higher than a desired speed is what we're finding here, even with this sign. Maybe we need to do something different.
Design changes.
Design changes.
Right.
The crossing islands, the trees, all the different things that change a roadway. Whether it's a local road or whether it's a main road, if you look ahead and all you see is road and it's straight, versus if you see islands in the road, roundabouts, things begin to creep in, those visual cues will change your speeds. And together, it's hard to say, okay, what the trees in the side of the road, will that drop them by, what, 2 miles per hour? But it's really the cumulative effect of all these things could change the character of the road.
Well, we're running out of time already, but there are 1,000,001 reasons to do this. We've hit on a few things, such as increasing economic vitality, of course, you know, the whole sanctity of life thing. And, you know, gosh, what are your top few reasons that you think that we should work on increasing walkability and bicycle use?
Well, again, we touched up on a lot of them, but a lot of times communities come to us talking about this as a matter of economic survival.
Okay.
Because this is what people are looking for. People are looking to move to walkable, bikeable communities. When they read their community surveys from recreation plan, they say, we want more opportunities to walk and bike. We want it to be easier. So a lot of this is respond to the public demand. Again, I think like we started out saying that, you know, what people have said, the way we've been doing things for so many years hasn't worked. We've been planning everything around the automobile for 50 plus years about getting cars quickly, and all of a sudden people are going, yeah, it didn't turn out the way we thought. There might be a better way to do things. And that's the whole complete street saying, whether you're walking, bicycling, driving a truck, in a bus or a car, you should be able to move around safely, efficiently and with dignity,
Hmm.
no matter what your abilities are.
Almost a civil right, whether you're disabled in a wheelchair or you're elderly. I mean, we have a booming elderly population with the baby boomers and an obesity epidemic and children wanting to walk to school.
You look at some of these things, like 4 to 3 lane conversions or things of that nature. You could say, oh, this is for the bike lanes or the crossing islands we'll get in. Well, actually, it's a kind of a no-brainer improvement for automobile safety. It slows down the speeds, and if you're trying to make a left turn, other cars aren't blocking your view, things that are better for elderly drivers. So a lot of the things we're talking about, I think people think it's for a specific group, but a lot of these things are really trying to improve safety and mobility for across the spectrum, no matter what mode you're traveling in.
And somebody made the point to me the other day that even if you are a driver, you need to get out of your car usually and walk to something, across the street here and there. So,
We're all pedestrian at some time.
right. So this has been super interesting. I wish we had more time to talk about more, but we're out of time. Tell us what kind of resources you would recommend people go to.
Oh, okay. I think one thing that maybe just put in the Google search engine would be the Vision Zero.
Okay.
There's the Michigan Complete Streets Coalition, which has a lot of kind of good information on what just came out, links to all the different Complete Streets policies and programs around the state. We were involved in a Michigan Complete Streets Institute. It's a training. There are a series of recorded webinars and presentations that really look at this from all kinds of different perspectives.
Okay.
That's another thing. And also NACTO, North American City Transportation Officials, has a lot of the more cutting edge designs on their guidelines, which are all online.
And what's your website?
GreenwayCollab.com.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Norm, for being here today.
Thank you. It was a
It's been
pleasure.
Really interesting. For an archive of today's show, go to ewashna.org/greenroom. Thanks for joining us here in the Green Room.